Field reports from the strange. This is Obscura Bureau.
This pattern of sudden disappearance after financial collapse has historical precedents in major fraud cases. Individuals who orchestrate large-scale financial deception often face a choice when their schemes unravel. The psychological pressure of maintaining a fraudulent identity can become overwhelming over time. Choosing anonymity over wealth represents a complete rejection of the fraudulent persona they created. This decision to disappear completely requires severing all digital and financial ties. Living anonymously means adopting entirely new patterns of behavior and consumption. The transition from extreme wealth to street-level anonymity involves significant psychological adaptation. This extreme response to financial scandal reveals the ultimate cost of maintaining deception at the highest levels. The financier's portfolio was structured around complex financial instruments, including derivatives and leveraged positions. This operational model mirrored patterns seen in other high-pressure financial environments, where rapid decision-making is constant. The industry's globalized nature meant transactions crossed multiple jurisdictions with varying regulatory oversight. Extreme wealth accumulation often involves sophisticated asset protection strategies and offshore holdings. Such environments create immense psychological pressure, with success metrics tied directly to financial performance. The mechanisms of high-stakes finance often separate personal identity from professional actions. This case demonstrates how external success markers can mask internal pressures within competitive industries. The financial industry's intensity creates environments where risk assessment becomes a constant professional requirement. The pressure in this world is immense, with fortunes and reputations made or lost on split-second decisions. This environment creates immense psychological strain, where a single miscalculation can trigger catastrophic financial and personal consequences. Then, at the height of his career, he vanished. Such disappearances often follow a pattern of mounting pressure, where the individual can no longer sustain the facade required by their position. Initial reports suggested a possible tragedy, sparking investigations. In fraud cases, a sudden disappearance can be a strategic move to avoid immediate accountability, forcing authorities to piece together events from a void. The mechanisms of such high-pressure environments are well documented, often involving complex financial structures that obscure true liabilities until a crisis point. Comparisons to historical scandals reveal a common pattern. Immense pressure precedes a critical failure, followed by a disruptive event that triggers formal scrutiny. The disappearance was not a random act of violence, but a carefully planned escape from a constructed life. This pattern of self-orchestrated vanishing is a known phenomenon in fraud cases, where individuals flee mounting pressure. The calculated nature of such disappearances often involves severing financial and social ties in advance. Unlike victims of crime, these individuals typically leave behind minimal forensic evidence by design. The timing often coincides with impending exposure or financial collapse, making escape seem like the only option. This method of disappearance creates a false narrative of victimhood, diverting initial investigations. The life left behind is often revealed to be unsustainable, built on deception or unmanageable expectations. Such cases shift from missing person investigations to searches for fugitives from financial or legal consequences. The deliberate disappearance was confirmed by authorities and financial investigators as a planned event, not an accident or abduction. Evidence indicated careful planning, a hallmark of sophisticated financial fraud cases, where perpetrators methodically cover their tracks. Assets were moved through financial systems, a common pattern in schemes where funds are transferred to obscure the money trail. Digital footprints were altered, involving the deletion or modification of online records, emails, and communication logs. A new, untraceable identity was prepared, which can involve forged documents, alternative passports, and establishing new financial profiles. Such disappearances often involve premeditated steps to evade detection, similar to cases of corporate fraud where individuals vanish after financial crimes. The goal was a clean break from his former life. This is a common pattern in fraud cases, where individuals attempt to sever all ties to previous identities and activities. For a significant period, he successfully lived under this new identity. Maintaining a false identity requires consistent use of fabricated documents and avoidance of previous social circles. This double life creates parallel existences, one visible to the world, another hidden from it. Such deception often involves meticulous planning to prevent detection by authorities or former associates. The psychological strain of maintaining two separate lives can be substantial over time. This scenario mirrors patterns seen in various financial fraud and corporate scandal cases where individuals disappear and resurface elsewhere. This sustained reinvention went beyond temporary homelessness experiments documented in sociological studies. Unlike brief immersions for research or awareness campaigns, this was a deliberate, long-term severing from previous identity markers. The mechanism involved systematically rejecting comfort and privilege, not just experiencing deprivation. This pattern mirrors extreme identity erasure seen in some fraud cases where perpetrators create entirely new personas. The complete reinvention suggests a calculated break from all previous social and economic connections. Such sustained deception requires maintaining the facade across multiple contexts and interactions. This approach differs from temporary undercover operations, which have defined endpoints and support systems. The deliberate distancing from comfort represents a psychological commitment to the new identity. Investigators initially focused on financial crimes, examining accounts and transactions for signs of fraud or embezzlement. However, interviews with associates consistently revealed a different narrative, centered on psychological pressure. The immense burden of maintaining a billionaire's public image and responsibilities became a central theme. This pressure is a documented phenomenon in high-stakes corporate and financial environments. The theory suggests the disappearance was an escape from this constant, overwhelming strain, not from legal consequences. This pattern aligns with cases where extreme success leads to isolation and psychological distress, rather than criminal motive. The fugitive's altered appearance and new circumstances were not enough to conceal his identity indefinitely. Recognition typically occurs through visual identification by someone familiar with the individual's original appearance. This process mirrors patterns seen in other fraud cases where fugitives are identified despite attempts at concealment. The recognition triggers an investigative chain where authorities are notified of the potential sighting. Authorities then employ verification methods to confirm the individual's identity before taking action. This confirmation phase is critical to avoid mistaken identity and ensure proper legal procedures are followed. The discovery represents the collapse of the constructed new life and the beginning of accountability. Such discoveries often occur through routine interactions rather than dramatic confrontations. The precise internal motivations behind his actions remain inaccessible to investigators and the public. Direct quotes attributed to him or specific psychological diagnoses are speculative without an official, verified evaluation. This limitation is common in fraud investigations, where the subject's true rationale is often reconstructed from evidence, not direct testimony. The exact timeline of his planning phase is largely private, leaving gaps in understanding the premeditation involved. Similarly, the full technical methods used to facilitate his disappearance are not publicly detailed. This pattern of obfuscation is a hallmark of sophisticated frauds, where operational secrecy is key to evading detection. Without access to these private details, the narrative relies on the documented aftermath and the patterns observed in comparable deception cases. The investigation thus focuses on the verifiable outcomes, the financial trail, the legal breaches, and the impact on victims. The emotional and legal aftermath for him and his associates remains largely undocumented in public records. This lack of documentation is common in cases where settlements are private or investigations remain ongoing. A common misconception frames this event as a perfect crime or a clever criminal getaway. In reality, it was a personal escape, not a criminal one in the traditional legal sense. This distinction is crucial. Escaping personal circumstances differs fundamentally from evading law enforcement after a provable illegal act. Such narratives often get simplified in public discourse, losing the nuance between personal flight and criminal evasion. This was not a case of deferred gratification or hidden wealth. The individual was actively rejecting financial resources entirely, a deliberate choice distinct from temporary concealment. A common misconception frames such extreme rejection as a glamorous or philosophical lifestyle choice. In reality, the plan involved embracing the severe hardships of homelessness. Life on the streets carries documented risks, including exposure, violence, and lack of access to basic necessities. This reality, far from philosophical abstraction, was a calculated and accepted component of the individual's strategy. Such cases highlight a pattern where the rejection of societal systems is pursued to its most extreme logical conclusion. The mechanism here moves beyond simple fraud or hidden assets into a complete disengagement from material value. The irreversible decision often emerges when perceived options narrow under immense pressure. This case study demonstrates how financial and legal entanglements can create a sense of inescapable confinement. The extreme measures considered are not about literal disappearance, but about seeking an exit from a self-created trap. The pressure point is frequently a culmination of obligations, debts, or legal exposures that appear to have no conventional solution. This pattern is observed in various fraud cases, where initial success paradoxically builds the walls of the eventual prison. The lesson centers on the psychological and systemic mechanisms that make a drastic, often illegal, choice seem like the only path forward. It highlights a critical failure point, where risk management collapses and desperation overrides long-term consequence analysis. Ultimately, the case serves as a stark examination of the human response when cornered by the architecture of one's own actions. Public identities, even those built on immense power and wealth, are fundamentally fragile constructs. When that identity crumbles, the drive to reclaim anonymity and personal control can become overwhelming. This is not a simple desire for privacy, but a profound psychological need to escape the persona that has been created. For professionals in high-stakes environments, this case underscores a critical, often ignored need: sustainable pressure valves. Without structured mental health resources and legitimate outlets, the pressure has nowhere to go but inward, leading to drastic actions. The ultimate, stark reality this reveals is that walking away from extreme wealth and status is not a simple act of resignation. It is a complex, often traumatic, process of disentangling one's self-worth from public perception and material success. The mechanisms of identity, wealth, and control are deeply interwoven, making a clean break nearly impossible without significant support. This process of self-annihilation is a documented pattern in high-stakes fraud, where individuals must sever all ties to their past identities. Erasing one's old life completely often involves abandoning family, friends, and any record of previous existence to avoid detection. The only viable path forward becomes constructing an entirely new persona, complete with forged credentials and a fabricated history. This transformation serves as a stark reminder that immense wealth, often acquired illicitly, does not guarantee freedom. Instead, such fortunes can build the most inescapable cages, trapping the individual in a web of constant deception and paranoia. The psychological mechanism is one of entrapment. The more one invests in the fraud, the harder it becomes to escape its consequences. This pattern mirrors other financial deceptions, where the initial lie necessitates ever grander fabrications to maintain the illusion. Ultimately, the cage is not just physical or legal, but a psychological prison of one's own making.
If the report helped, subscribe and open the next case.